Hey everybody, welcome back to yet another world building bonus episode. In fact, this is going to be our final world building bonus episode of the year, and even the final podcast episode of the year. I said that in a very weird and stilted weird way, but I'm not going to cut this out. I'm joined by Eden yet again.
Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah, all good. Ready and raring to, I don't know, throw ideas out into the ether and see what sticks.
Yeah. Today, we are going to be talking about a subject which you, the listeners, if you follow us on Twitter, voted on. We threw out... I should probably run down the options we were given on the poll. And we can sort of see what you could have had. So I kind of threw out 4 different options for people to vote on for this final episode of the year. They were a winter festival, a legendary hero, a town/settlement, or a brave expedition, and overwhelmingly, people voted for a winter festival. I guess it's quite fitting though. This episode's going out Christmas Eve and such.
Yeah, so, makes sense. It's seasonal.
Yeah. It all seemed great right up until the point when I sort of looked at it and went, "Cool, we're doing a winter festival." Then my brain went, "You already wrote about a winter festival," so I think what we're going to do is expand mainly on the, admittedly quite small, little kind of framework of a winter festival that I'd already written based on the date of this, January 2019. So that's nearly 2 years ago I wrote this, and I haven't touched it since. So no wonder I basically forgot about it.
Lots of space to fill in the gaps and what have you.
Yeah, we can always change everything and all that, so it's fine. So basically, what I've got written... Oh, I always forget to do this. We should throw out the details for our World Anvil page at the start. So people can sort of follow along. So you can find all of our homebrew setting stuff, but if you just Google World Anvil Valana, Vallanna, it's the top result. That is our world. All of our D&D episodes and all these world building episodes really are set in or are to do with this custom setting. So yeah, basically it's a sort of Wikipedia for our setting really, and it has a lot of gaps in it that we are slowly filling in with these episodes. So previously, as I say, start of 2019, I wrote about what I've called the Frostfire Festival, which is basically sort of like Christmas, sort of like New Year. It's kind of, I sort of had it like it spans a whole week, but the week sort of is like half in 1 year, half in the next year. So it sort of just kind of bridges over in between the 2 years, essentially, to sort of be like, right, we're right in the middle of winter. Let's have a big feast and sort of celebrate family, friends, everyone coming together to be like, hey, it's super not very nice out. Let's just party.
Keep spirits up.
Yeah. Which that has real world sort of things as well. Because traditionally, with sort of Christmas time, and that obviously probably before it was co-opted by Christianity and whatnot. And as a sort of real kind of like, hey, I'm just making my version of Christmas sort of thing, I've put in there's a character called Grandfather Winter, who I've described as a spindly figure with a beard of icicles, breath as cold as the north wind, and the skin the colour of a frozen pond. And he's usually just played by an elder member of the community. And children have to prove their bravery to Grandfather Winter, which normally is just sort of like, say you're going to be good or admit guilt to something you've done, or basically just be good. And they get a gift from Grandfather Winter's chest of wonders, a bottomless chest filled with countless treasures with a mind of its own, which is usually just like a chest with some sweets in it. Essentially, that's pretty much all I've written. Because I really did cop out on this and just say the origins of the festival were lost to time to fill in the whole history bit. But and it's not really traditionally tied to one deity or another. That's pretty much where we're starting from, I think. And, I don't think it's the worst of... we definitely started from less, let's say that.
Oh yeah, no, this is a perfectly good stepping point. But I guess, shall we start on the origin of things, as that's the biggest gap, I suppose?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So have you got an immediate thought on how far back this goes?
Well, I kind of, I kind of like the idea that it's not traditionally tied to one deity or another in this, because it really, rather than it sort of, to sort of bring it away from just being a Christmas analog. I like the idea that it maybe started literally just as like, it's the end of the year. We've got it's super cold. Let's just can we just have one day maybe to forget about all this hardship or something? Like, it's just sort of started somewhere as like a couple of people maybe fed up with the fed up with just the bitter cold and nastiness and everything, and just been like, maybe even if it was as far as like, let's just get pissed or something. Like, it started more as less on the religious side of things and more as like a sort of cultural sort of thing of like, okay, we need something to keep us going through this long winter sort of thing.
Yeah. I'm just thinking along the lines of like some of the ideas here, like the bottomless chest and the grandfather who judges whether or not you're worthy or whatever. That feels to me like the foundational ideas for that might have come out of a time of like real hardship and having to survive, and that maybe there would be like the oldest, wisest member of a group would be the guy that's kind of the quartermaster.
Yeah.
And he's got a quote unquote bottomless chest full of supplies, but you need to prove that you've earned your supplies for the day because times are hard, and the guy that does no work gets no food.
And that's just kind of morphed over time to be more of like a children's thing of like the children prove that they're going to be good for the year, and then they get a treat.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And it would, at one point, like living on the frontier, or say if you were just in the north perhaps and it was just cold, hard times, living through a few of those winters would require that kind of discipline until society had kind of gotten itself on its feet. And things had started, I don't know, trade routes, whatever. The things that would allow places that might be isolated to still get food during hard times, they might not be in place yet. But now that they are, hey, we can treat it like, everybody that ever did that kind of way of doing things, that's great-great-grandfathers, they suffered through all of that. The grandchildren now have this kind of strange echo of it almost. Where it's like, we're kind of going through the motions of, look, isn't winter hard, and we're all coming together, and you've got to earn your keep, kids, you need to prove your place. Where once upon a time it was like, hey, if you were the kid that didn't earn their place, then you didn't eat. That kid had no ancestors.
Yeah, no, I like that as a sort of like the sort of general kind of like morphing over maybe even like centuries from this, like you say, position of kind of genuine hardship of like, okay, we have limited stuff. The people who are contributing the most really ought to, be the ones who are getting the first dibs on it, sort of thing. Which is harsh in a way, but then if these winters are that harsh, it's a harsh time, and
it's almost like if you're not cut out to survive this, then no, you will not get anything, and if you're not cut out to survive it, nobody's going to carry you through it either, because maybe it just was that harsh.
Yeah, which interestingly is like kind of the opposite of the whole sort of maybe how it is now. The idea of like sort of what the festival has come to represent, which is like family, friends, and community coming together to withstand it. Then it was almost the opposite of like, oh no, if we're not keeping the if you can't contribute, you can't, you're not getting as much, sort of thing. It's almost the opposite sort of thing. It's not the community keeping everybody alive by pooling their stuff. It's the community, you got to earn your place, sort of thing. But maybe that's why this Grandfather Winter figure is kind of like a little bit sort of sinister in sort of aspect, and that of being like this kind of quite kind of creepy sort of like tall, spindly kind of figure, but like all of his kind of like attributes are things that almost you're trying to get away from in winter, which is like cold breath, sort of freezing, sort of anything kind of frozen, and that skin the color of a frozen pond. I mean, you don't want your water supply to freeze up, so maybe that's kind of all of he's like an embodiment of like the hardship side of things, and then everything else in the festival is sort of pushing back against that. So like the ones who need the help the most, like the people who can't do the the hunting, gathering, working, farming, and that so much, they're now taken care of, whereas he's more, he's sort of, it might be almost forgotten that this is why he's the, it's taken for granted now. Oh yeah, no, that's just how Grandfather Winter looks. But it sort of started out that he's a representation of the other side of, the opposite side of that, of like, no, this is what we're hiding from, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And perhaps it would be the kind of thing where if it was like born out of hardship, that there would eventually come a point where the tide was starting to turn, that the hardship was starting to fall away a little bit, perhaps, and that certain individuals in this community might have decided, like, oh, such and such banged his knee the other day. He can't actually go out and do any work right now, but I'm going to give him a bit of my food because I'm doing all right. And that could have built up over time to become this thing of like, maybe eventually it just became accepted that, hey, we're not actually going to let anybody fall behind anymore.
No.
There's no reason now. Everybody's doing all right enough that you carry me today, I'll carry you tomorrow, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I mean, it could be a thing of like the ones who aren't able to sort of hunt or whatever, the ones who aren't providing in that way during the times of, summer and that, they have other skills that come into play, sort of thing. So like you say, the kind of, I carry you today, and then you're still there to carry, to do your part in the, in the summer, because it be things like traders and things like that who can't do the trade routes or whatever, or I don't know, summer activities, whatever.
Yeah. And these are the kinds of individuals that would then lead into the creation of the festival, perhaps, that as they stay at home and they're comfortable and that they appreciate the work being done by the people that are going out, perhaps they're the ones that start creating food items, or they start arranging games. They do things so that when the workers get back, it's like, hey, we've got this all prepared for you because we want to show appreciation for the fact that you're keeping us all alive. And then over time, that just keeps building and building to the point where everybody's preparing for this now as the festival. The festival's the main thing. It's not the appreciation of the workers anymore. It's like, hey, this is just the whole of society recognizes we like this thing that we do, and we're all in it together. And then the Frostfire Festival would be born out of that, as it were. Like, there'd probably be like a point where they'd formalize it and maybe recognize, like, hey, this is the first year that nobody's had to go out during this period of time to do actual work, and we've kind of achieved what we set out to do. Like, our ancestors would be proud, that kind of thing. So it's time to start holding a formalized festival.
I think that the formalization thing is quite interesting, because maybe at a certain point it was, maybe this is a sort of general kind of idea of like, okay, we need to have something to look forward to, kind of spread around different places and that, but it was never sort of set as like, no, this is always going to be the sort of half of, this is always going to be the bridge between the 2 years. But when society was a bit sort of bigger, when there was more kind of like a kind of connections and government even, that's when it was sort of decided like, oh no, okay, well, we'll take this thing that everybody seems to be doing just on their own time frame and just say, okay, no, we're definitely still going to be doing it. We're just all now going to do it at the same time, and let's just call that the end of the like the end of the year festival, basically, sort of thing. Because it's still going to have all of the elements in it. We're still looking at it being in the middle of the winter and that. So it just kind of got sort of bureaucratized almost to be like, okay, no, this is maybe it was being looked at as like, oh god, no, this village is going to be out, well, not out of communication, but they're all going to be doing this week, and then the next week it's this one. Someone behind a desk somewhere has gone like, look, can we just do it everywhere at once, get it out of the way?
Yeah, we need to bring this in line so that we can maintain productivity. We need to know when we can send the cart from A to B and it will actually get there in time.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
I feel like we're very quickly realizing how actual Christmas got organized the way it was.
Oh yeah, no, this is all of them. So many festivals and things all have like a very kind of specific purpose once upon a time, and then we're just a few generations down the line and say, oh, that's an excuse to drink now.
Yeah,
mostly that's how we do it in this country anyway.
We're just a few generations down the line from the Coca-Cola trucks turn up every year. And,
oh god,
yeah.
You joke, but what a terrible
it's only a
future we have ahead of us.
It's only a part joke, because I know people, I don't think they're doing it this year, but like people who look forward to that, because the Coca-Cola truck turns up in Bournemouth Square every year, and
strange thing.
I don't go, but like it's definitely a thing.
I've just got visions of a weird choir that and now we will sing the song of our people. Holidays are coming, holidays are coming. Oh, Jesus. Or not Jesus, as the case may be.
I mean, it is a banger, though. That's a good song.
I've got an idea, just as a different angle in terms of like, okay, so we've got obviously the society, the festival, like there's the celebration and everything. But I quite like the idea, and maybe tell me if it's completely out of left field and not fun. But I quite like the idea of like a temperance society of sorts. Like that there would still be the people that hold like, no, we remember the real
traditional Frostfire.
Yeah. And that they'd be the types that would like, maybe it's just because I heard this song the other day, but I heard the hymn In the Bleak Midwinter the other day for the first time in a very long time. And I was like, good God, this is a maudlin Christmas song.
It's pretty grim, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was like, wow, at one point this was the peak of like, it's Christmas, let's sing In the Bleak Midwinter. Sorry, In the Bleak Midwinter. And I was like,
I remember doing choir, like I was in the school choir for many years, and that and doing like Christmas concerts and things, and like this is before my voice dropped.
Back in the Songs of Praise days.
Man, look, I used to be a soprano. Let's look at it that way. But yeah, all of those kind of Christmas, like as soon as you stop and think about them, a lot of them are pretty depressing and bleak, and like they're all just kind of like, oh, shit's tough, isn't it? And that's pretty much it.
That's it. All those Victorian dirges that are all just like, yes, it's horrible, and we're not going to eat and celebrate. We will abide, and we will stand here in the cold because that's what God wants of us.
And we will not feed the poor.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they wouldn't be there if he didn't want them to be. So yeah, I could imagine that there would be a group of maybe like, not necessarily right in the middle of everything stinking it up, but on the edges of the festival, you might find like a group that are singing these like maudlin songs and giving everybody the evil eye as they pass, judging them, being like, frivolity at this time of year, disgusting.
Traditionalists sort of things. And then the people who during the rest time of the year are like abstaining from drink, and like you say, they're year-round temperance people. They're just, I mean, what's a good way of putting it? Like every community's got one. They're kind of like, I don't know, like kind of, well, just like a party pooper type person. Yeah,
the
like
curtain twitchers, they're the ones that would be banging on the pub door because somebody's walked out and made a bit of noise just after closing time.
Yeah.
Like every little thing, they're the ones that are there with a stern look in their eyes and a complete, I don't know, refusal to let go of the smallest things.
No, I like that, the sort of reactionary sort of kind of thing of like, because there's always someone, isn't there? There's always someone. And I suppose this is something I haven't really kind of put into the, I mean, not that we've, fully fleshed out a lot of stuff in the setting, but it is a kind of reactionary kind of social movement, even as small as this would be, because you've got to imagine most communities are not that big really, but there's going to be maybe one kind of crotchety old lady in the corner going like, oh, these people in my day, which is, it wasn't really any different in her day. She just doesn't like alcohol, so she's just taken on this sort of like general kind of reactionary, there shouldn't be no fun for anybody kind of,
Exactly.
Mood. Yeah.
That's it. And like you say, maybe there aren't that many, like maybe one or two per village, but they'd all be like sending messages to the next village over. It's like, do you know what they do in my village? It's disgusting. Oh yes, well you wouldn't want to move to my village. It's just as bad over here, if not worse. Like I can imagine that kind of like not in my back garden type attitude.
Oh, totally. I mean, we talked. We have that all-purpose almanac that we came up with. I get the feeling like there's got to be like a letters page in there that maybe these people are the equivalent of writing letters to the editor, sort of thing.
Do people not understand proprietary?
Yeah.
Do they not look to history and understand the reason?
I mean, and for the people who publish the almanac, it's just good free content. Just slap some of these letters in the print.
Oh, yeah,
we've padded it out. Yeah, we've padded it out by another 5 pages, and we know these people will buy it just to see their letters in print, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So everybody wins. Yeah, I like that. No, that's a good addition there. I feel like it's very much a fringe thing and isn't going to be the focus of the festival, but it definitely is a sort of like added extra element of like, I mean, almost kind of like a sort of Luddite type thing, but without the technology aspect of like the festival itself has moved on to be a kind of, I mean, fairly wholesome sort of like everybody, hey, we all help each other. We all have a feast. We all get together. We all celebrate the end of the year, start of the new one, and that. But they just can't let go of that past of like, no, this used to be about excluding people who couldn't do things.
Yeah, that's it. Some of you aren't good enough to be living here.
Guys, it's a whole organization of Scrooges.
Effectively. Of course, they'd all be wearing like dark, dour colours, and just got a vision of them like like a big stick with a lantern on the end of it, and they just stood there. Like maybe there'd only be like a husband, wife, and an unfortunate young daughter or something who's got a look about her like she wants to be involved with the festival. But it'd be like the Westboro Baptist Church kids, where you look at them and it's God, it's breaking my heart to see it, because in your eyes, child, I can see you know that something is wrong here, but you can't get away.
Yeah, if only you could get away, you could see that this isn't right, Most people aren't like this, but you're trapped. Yeah, I mean, even aside from this, like in real life, you see sort of. This is gonna sound super judgy, but like you see that sort of odd family walking around in most towns have got them, sort of thing of like always kind of, I don't know, like you said, curtain twitching. But you remember at school there was always a kid who was like, oh no, they're not allowed to go do this. They're not allowed to come to birthday parties. They're not allowed to.
Yes, yeah. Not allowed to do any. Can't have sugar. That kind of thing. Where it's like, okay, right. Parents have put a moratorium on being a child, right? But yeah.
Can't watch a 12 film because you're not 12 yet. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Following the rules in a very arbitrary way.
Yeah, for sure. But then again, I'm generalizing again, but like always leaning on the sort of the ones who are more likely to be anti-vax and stuff like that as well. That kind of like, trust no one but themselves kind of attitude sort of thing.
What's the D&D version of anti-vax? Are they completely anti-magic? Are they just like, I don't put any stock in that magic rubbish?
I don't know. That's a good question, really, because I mean, we haven't really delved into this, but I've always thought that probably the majority of like medicine stuff is still not done by clerics and things. Clerics are doing divine healing and stuff, but there's probably you're still going to have like just like medical practitioners and things, because a lot of things are just going to be like broken arm and stuff, and you're not going to go find the cleric just because you've broken your arm. You're just going to go see a guy who's going to set it.
Unless you're really lucky and happen to have like the local chapel or something nearby where it's he happens to be there, so it's convenient to drop in.
Oh, for sure.
Otherwise you're going to have the medicine man who makes poultices, or the old witchy woman, that kind of thing. So I imagine all that's kind of that's still all there, and I would imagine those who are kind of imbued with the kind of divine, we're seeing them disproportionately because we're playing D&D. But in the community, you're not every village is going to have a priest who can do healing spells. Most priests are just going to be priests, sort of thing. They can tell you the good word, but that's about it.
Yeah, they're not exactly going to be throwing around like, oh, child, come here, cure wounds, sort of thing. So yeah, I feel like this is the problem, because it's a game. We're disproportionately running into people who can do crazy, amazing magic stuff and things like that. But if everybody could, then society would be crazy. But just nature of things, you don't really see that so much. It's only the NPCs that you run into and like Jason shouts at and stuff. That's the ones that we're,
It's a complete tangent, but I just went into thinking about like, what would it be like if you were one of these people that had like magic powers and you rolled into a very small town where they haven't seen it for a long time, and then you do something to help somebody, and then you've basically got everybody running up to your feet like, please help, please. Eventually, would you not just have to be like, look, I've got my life to live, I've got to go? Like, is that when you like have to have a fireball floating in your hand? Like, look, guys, I don't want to have to do this, but you've got to let me go now.
No, I mean, I think that's a good story of like you start out being like, oh no, I can help, but then there's just this constant stream of sort of people. Everyone's always going to have problems, basically, and you can't be the one to fix everything for them.
So it's kind of the crab bucket theory, where no one crab will ever get out of a crab bucket because the rest of them will pull them down. So many grabbing hands, you'll never get away from it. And just to bring it around, because this actually feeds back into the Frostfire Festival idea of like, maybe that was the sentiment at some point, was that if you give help to one person in the village and that they're not actually going to pull their weight, eventually we're going to have all these grasping hands. and we'll never be able to do enough work to be able to help that. And getting over that hump of recognizing, like, okay, there's enough food in the bucket now that we don't have to worry about it, so to speak.
Yeah, or even just like changing the thinking on it, because maybe that was, that was holding a lot of places back, of thinking like, oh no, it has to, this sort of every man for himself kind of thinking.
It would create a kind of desperate helplessness that once you are, like, once you know you're not going to get help, you would become just a desperate beggar, probably, because there's nothing else to do but that.
I feel like we're going in a very look, I've got no problem advocating for socialism, is what I'm saying.
Hey, man. Yeah. We're British people doing D&D. Of course it's going to have a little bit of like social commentary going. I don't think that any fiction is worth any time unless it's got some measure of like, here's a reflection of the time that we're in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, yes. So yes, basically the people came around to the idea that maybe helping other people is not wrong.
And that it's not going to create problems down the line as much as anything else.
If anything, the people that you might help get through the winter, like you say, might pay you back in kind later on when they can support themselves, sort of thing.
That's it. It'd be the kind of thing where Grandfather Winter might well have been like, it might just have been like one fairly harsh quartermaster in one place, and that the story like spread. Like potentially something along those lines of like, it was one guy in one place, and he had, almost in a kind of Scrooge way, had to be shown the error of his ways by the good people around him, that he held everybody to this standard, and then when everything seemed at its darkest, everybody around him came to his aid or something like that. Maybe it was a turn of a reversal of fortunes kind of thing. And at that point, he realized he could be a bit more free with the quartermaster's role, and that he could dish out bits and pieces here and there.
Well, how about this then? Maybe he really was. He was like a kind of lanky, kind of thin guy, but just was like in charge of the stuff. And what happened was he fell through the ice on a lake. And then they dragged him out. He had frostbite, he had everything, but the community kept him warm. He was cared for by the very people who he would have left out to dry, sort of thing. And it changed his heart.
Yeah, that's perfect. And that leads into the whole, like, his beard is made of icicles because he comes out of the water and immediately it starts freezing. His skin is the color of a frozen pond. Well, he fell in the frozen pond. The kids that see this might well look at it and say, oh, he looks like the pond.
So like, he maybe didn't get that
kind of descriptors. Yeah, that's a good foundation for it.
Yeah. Maybe he didn't, maybe the name Grandfather Winter came later, sort of thing. When it had morphed into more of like a kind of mythical sort of figure of like, more of a sort of symbolic representation of winter itself, rather than what it actually started out as in this one place being this actual guy who just happened to be kind of thin and nearly died from frost, sort of thing.
I like it as kind of like, what do you think in terms of, it sounds like a very childish name to give. So perhaps it would be like, beforehand it was, make sure you don't upset Grandfather Winter. We need to eat, maybe Dad needs to get his food for the wood that he's going to chop, that kind of thing. And then afterwards, maybe a year or two later, Grandfather Winter turns into this friendly figure, and that the local kids, like, it would be the kind of thing where, like, once upon a time, he would scowl at the kids as they go past, and then after this event, perhaps he'd give them a wave, and there's Grandfather Winter, and it's a reversal of the role almost.
Maybe.
It could be over-egging the pudding at that point, making it a little bit too saccharine, a little bit too much of the kind of like...
Yeah, I was kind of thinking maybe it would be that, like we're sort of taking two sides of it, so that, like, this sort of what people would consider the visual kind of elements of Grandfather Winter have come from this one folk tale of this guy. And the name Grandfather Winter and the sort of connotations of it actually just being Grandfather Winter is winter, that's come separately. And then over time they've just kind of merged together, like again, to bring it back to Coca-Cola, the whole red big bearded guy in a red suit is 100% Coca-Cola. Yeah, but people just draw that as Santa now. That's you ask a kid to draw Santa, that's what they're going to draw, and they won't know, without any of the Coca-Cola branding or anything. But that's where that visual representations come from. Completely detached now, basically, other than in their own, advertising.
Yeah, so the apocryphal story becomes this broader thing, this thing of like, maybe as an adult, the rest of them would all kind of like have an implicit knowledge that, oh, this story represents something, or at least the smarter people within the community might recognize that. Whereas for the kids, yeah, it's just become this, I don't know, winter's allegory of sorts.
Or maybe it did start as like a sort of, like I say, a lot of the elements were with the kind of allegory thing as well, of like, oh, you know, be good and we'll have an easy winter sort of thing. Even it just started as, you know, as a way to kind of, you know, wintertime, you don't want the children to run off and fall through a lake. You know, there's dangers there that they might not know about, so you're trying to kind of keep them in line, you know, sort of keep them close and that, and so you got to be good, you got to, you know, listen to what we say and that. And then so sort of the lie, well, not lie, but, you know, the sort of thing put out is like, oh no, if you're good, we'll have a good winter and everything will be fine. And then over that merges with this thing to make this character Grandfather Winter, of like, be good and we'll have a good winter, and Grandfather Winter come together as like this sort of anthropomorphization of, you know, the concept of winter.
Yeah.
And the visual elements then come from this one.
For him and proving you're ready for Grandfather Winter so that you can have a good time when the bad times come, as it were.
Yeah, yeah. And then the visual elements of this character, Grandfather Winter, have come from this, you know, obviously morphed over time, but like a thin guy with icicles for a beard and frozen breath, and he had a big chest, like you know.
It's a really stupid old reference, and I don't know, you might want to cut this out. Do you remember there's a really, really old advert? I think it was Smirnoff Ice, the Judder Man.
Oh yeah, definitely remember that one.
Yeah, the Judder Man is what I've got in my mind of like big spiky face, like kind of made out of ice.
Oh man, that was a classic advert.
Yeah, no, it's stuck in my head clearly. Yeah. But mostly just because the character concept was good. It's like, oh yeah, that's quite fun.
That's on YouTube. Now's not the time to be looking, but
yeah, I'm glad that you thought that fit the bill, because I was like, I'm really, really aiming for something properly. Like, listeners, if you know what the Judder Man is, I'm pretty sure that everybody our age knows.
Yeah, it's Schnapps.
Yeah, it was Alco Pop's advert is what it came from, and it's probably it's over 10 years old now.
It's definitely on YouTube because I found it.
Cool. People can look there then and get educated. Just the Americans in particular, I'd expect. The
Judder Man. Then type that into YouTube. It's the first result, basically.
It feels like a Mighty Boosh character. Not to take us too far up into the bushes here, but it feels like one of those kinds of like, it's a character with one very specific trait, and that's it.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Oh god, what's that guy? Old Greg.
Of course, with his mangina.
Yeah.
I like the Mirror Man who shines his balls and says, "Look how they shine."
Oh god, that's I. It's been probably 10 years at least since I've watched that show, so I do wonder if it holds up. Because
first two seasons, I would say.
There's a specific era of sort of mid 2000s, late 2000s comedy. That was I did enjoy it at the time. I just can't remember much.
I feel like it's something that, in a weird way, like most of what they did was like, yeah, that's kind of what we do to some extent. Like, just come up with very like weird ideas and then just like go like, right, let's see it through to the end. Let's put our characters in the weird idea and say what would they do inside this weird idea. Anyway, bringing it
back. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that Judder Man advert for a long. I mean, that must have been what, late 90s?
Yeah, no, Alco Pop's on the golf course time for me, I'm pretty sure. It's around that era.
Yeah. Okay, so bringing it back to this festival then, and moving away from the sort of Grandfather Winter element, because I think we've covered quite a lot of that as sort of this. Well, actually, okay. So here's what I think. Just to cap off the Grandfather Winter thing. So the current sort of way that character is sort of portrayed is very much. I mean, what I've written, I've kind of got is very much like a shopping mall Santa sort of thing, but like not quite as cheesy. But you know what I mean? Like, the one member of the community probably puts a bit of blue face paint on and everything, and it's an older person, and they play Grandfather Winter, and the small children have to come up, and I've kind of written prove their bravery. And I've sort of said, can take many forms, from an admission of guilt for a transgression. So they're sort of saying like, oh no, I mean, the adults are going to know it's them really, but they're sort of, it's a life lesson, they're imparting sort of moral life lessons here of like, you got to take responsibility for your actions, vow to honor one's parents, which I think, we can tie back into that whole thing of like, like I said, about kind of winter's a hard time and you want to keep the children safe. So this kind of falls into that kind of thing.
You don't want a kid to maybe sneak food that might cause a problem later or go out into the cold when nobody knows. So that'll keep them in line and give them a little bit of extra motivation. Or think about Grandfather Winter when I'm about to do those things.
Yeah. The other option, the other sort of example I gave was like a promise to protect a younger sibling. So then again, sort of taking a little bit of the pressure off of the parents again. Sort of thing, it's a hard time, but also imparting that lesson like everybody takes care of each other, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But essentially, they in mind, I've got it that they're basically visiting Grandfather Winter in his grotto, and they walk out with a gift, which is like, I don't know, like might be some, a sweet or a present of some sort, but like something small kind of thing, but this sort of symbolic, it's Grandfather Winter's chest of wonders, and it's just a box in most places. But
it might be the kind of thing where in a lot of like small villages and towns, like all of the adults would kind of band together to be like, okay, so the carpenter's going to make a wooden doll for this guy's daughter. He's going to give the carpenter's son a hammer or something because he's thinking about taking on a vocation. He's about to come of age. Like you would have an exchange perhaps, and that rather than the parents giving gifts, perhaps this is what happens instead, and that it's a community giving gifts, and that they could all be very consciously picked things that the kids don't know this, but Grandfather Winter is definitely picking something specifically made or acquired for that child by the village to be like, hey, we're going to steer you towards this way of thinking, because a lot of toys and that kind of stuff ultimately do represent like, hey, here's the little bit of a trade, like start thinking about a trade and what you're going to do as you grow up, that kind of stuff.
I like that, and I feel like that would maybe be a thing that's more practiced in smaller communities where everybody knows each other a bit more. Whereas the more kind of like, it's a sort of general kind of that he's giving out sweets and things like that. That happens more in, because this is a festival that's celebrated everywhere. But, in a larger town or city, you're not going to have the opportunity to know everybody, but the children are still going to want to go visit Grandfather Winter. So in that case, if in one sort of way of looking at it is the presents are less useful, because they're just like, you've been good, here, have a lollipop or something.
It might well be on that line. You could have like almost again on like traditionalist versus modernist view of like in the villages out in the sticks, they kind of do it the quote unquote right way, where this is about like leading the next generation forward and giving them the tools to do that, or the encouragement and what have you. Whereas in the cities, maybe it is just like it's an excuse to give kids sweets.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
And it's part of like. Yeah, as part of a shopping trip or something. It's really, again, we're bringing a bit of the social commentary and be like, it's the over-commercialization of the Frostfire Festival, sort of thing.
Maybe some highfalutin noble or something at some point back when it was formalized was the first one that did something really over the top for their child and started some terrible trend of just like, now the nobles do some ridiculous version of this where if it's not a horse and cart, if it's not like a horse and carriage with footmen and everything, like that being the entire gift itself, it's not enough. Like that kind of attitude could come around in certain circles, as it were.
Yeah. So are we thinking, I was kind of thinking there's probably going to be, in general, there was going to be like a gift giving element anyway, but are you sort of saying that this is the only place where they're getting gifts?
Yeah, I thought maybe in those smaller places in particular, that it would be the kind of thing where like as a community, you're not, and especially like in terms of time and stuff, you can't necessarily justify giving a child what is just a toy to spend time with if you're out in the middle of the sticks and this is a kid that's got to learn a vocation and the rest of it. Instead, conscious thought about like, hey, I'm going to give him a little toy horse and cart or something because we're going to be traders, or I am a trader, my child should pick up that line. I'm going to give him a horse and cart so that in his head he can play trader or whatever.
So again, maybe this is like a sort of a bit of a regional difference then between in the towns and cities. Maybe the grandfather winter visit is just like a sort of little trivial thing for the children of like, oh yeah, no, you go in, you get your sweet, you get to talk to grandfather winter, and then maybe on it'd be like the middle day of the festival, you know, when it goes over from one year to the next, then the family give a gift, sort of thing. But that's something that's only really happened, that's more recent change. And like you say, the traditional way of doing it is that the community bands together and has something specific that's given out by this grandfather winter figure kind of thing. So it's, again, we're still, I mean, like all the, all traditions and that, they morph over time. So the more recent morph is the sort of more urban kind of variant on it, which is, oh no, the family give a gift, which is a result, of not everybody can know everybody sort of thing. So you tend to just give a gift to the family, that within your own family sort of thing. So that it's become separated from the grandfather winter thing of a little bit.
Yeah, and that there's like an implicit logic to it all that like it makes sense, as you say, that thing of like, hey, if you don't know all of your neighbours, you're not necessarily going to sit down with them and go, so what should I get my kid for the Frostfire Festival? Like, you're not even bothered about their input.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, sort of thing. You're going to keep things in the family if you don't really know everybody.
Yeah. And not in that terrible Hills of Eyes kind of keeping it in the family way.
Oh, God, we hope not. I don't want to introduce that into our setting. Not in an official capacity.
Well, there's a lot of mountains out there. There's a lot of deep caves and places for people to get lost for a few generations.
Oh, look, I'm not saying I'll stop right there. All I'm saying is we're not.
You just want to draw a line and not have Bone Tomahawk take place at any point during any of this.
Pretty much. Yeah. Basically, I'm saying we're not going to do a world building episode on the weird incest families in the woods. Not anytime soon, anyway.
Folks, given a chance to vote, if you want to hear it, I'm game for that recording.
First episode of the new year, we're going to talk about the woods people. Oh God. So yeah,
or not.
Christmas, fake Christmas, Frostfire Festival.
Bringing it back around. Is there would you want to attach necessarily a strictly actual formal religious element to this in any way? Are any of the deities of the world associated, or is this more that it's just this is the festival of the people?
Well, that's a very good question, because I can't remember if we have a deity of winter. I'm just going to have a look.
I'm all right with locations to some extent, but I don't know how many deities and things you might have come up with. That's something
we did a whole episode on deities about 9 months ago, and I can't remember.
Yeah, that's the problem.
I did write it. I'm just looking through. There's a little bit close. We've got Ori as seasons, goddess of the seasons and change. I'm just seeing if there's one of winter. I've got a feeling. Yeah, there isn't one. I got a feeling that I was thinking, we'll just simplify this. Liam and I just folded a god of winter into the god of seasons and change.
Well, that's the kind of thing within a pantheon where it might well be that that's the recognized god of the moment, but there might be a lesser god, somebody in a lesser book. It depends on. I don't know. You're the one setting the standard in terms of how the society is structured like that. But I can picture that, it might be that in the minds of most common people, this major god is the one that represents all of the seasons. But actually, this god has had 4 children, and that each of those 4 children actually does their work during the 4 phases of the year, and that the parent oversees the entire year, as it were. That the way that a lot of old pantheons work is a lot like that.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of written it down on the article here as the primary pantheon, so it totally could be sub sort of, even if they're just kind of sub aspects of this main one that we just kind of haven't named yet. So it could be in regards to the Frostfire Festival. I get the feeling I'm not opposed to there being some element of it. Maybe sort of in a slightly, those already religiously inclined maybe take this as an opportunity to worship, and to have certain services to this. I mean, we call it Ori, the goddess of seasons and change. Maybe this becomes a sort of, this has been co-opted a little bit, not in the fully taking over way that Christmas and Christianity and that took over. What was it? God, why am I
paganism?
Yeah, the pagan one that I can't remember the name of.
Oh yeah,
that was sort of
it's
around
not
the same
it's
time.
not Gnosticism.
Yeah. No. I just mean there was like a festival at this time, and my brain is not.
Yeah, no, it's in my head as well, and I'm struggling because I'm like I know a decent amount about all this stuff, but it's all in one big tangled lump of concepts.
Yeah. But you know what I mean. So not in that full kind of way of like, oh no, we're co-opting this whole thing, and anybody who does, but more they're just using this as like, okay, well this is a winter festival. Have you heard the good news about our goddess of seasons and change? She is, she is very much winter's kind of one of her things, sort of thing. So maybe they take this as one of their high holidays, or not so much high holidays as so much as like this is a time for increased worship.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. But it's just kind of loosely affiliated.
Perhaps it's just that I'm thinking in terms of a little bit of a reaction and trying not to echo real life entirely, but where we've got the maudlin whingers, the singers of the like unhappy winter songs and stuff, perhaps the religious side of this could actually be upbeat and could actually be part of the celebration. And they would look on the people that aren't joining in as like, yeah, we are celebrating the winter. We are surviving. We are thriving. We have enough to get by with. Surely this is the God's indication that we do the right thing. That kind of stuff.
Well, if they're worshippers of the god of seasons, they've got to take into goddess of seasons. They've got to take into account that winter is one of the seasons, sort of thing. So they would be worshipping this as like, even though times are hard, this is as Ori wills it, sort of thing. Kind of thing. And so we should be, we should be celebrating and look at all that Ori has brought for winter time. That kind of thing. So like you say, they're not. Idea. Yeah.
Sorry, but perhaps it's a silly idea, but it tickles me a little bit that maybe the adherents to that deity could potentially do things like build ice sculptures, or like not quite snowmen, but snow sculptures. They would actually use the time and the space. Like, this is a unique time of year. We can do things with the world that are not possible otherwise. And to not do these things would be to ignore the season. So of course they would embrace the opportunity to do things like sledding or skiing. Like perhaps that would be the kind of stuff that.
Man, this sounds like a fun religion.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking. Is it would make a change to have one where it's like, hey, they're just enjoying the different times of the year. Yeah. They're not doing anything other than saying to people like, hey, here's all the potential of this weather we're experiencing. Like, let's do these things.
I like the idea that then in the summer they're like the first out on the beach sunbathing.
Yeah. They totally embrace every opportunity to just whatever nature is doing. They are down with it. They are ready for it. They've got rituals. They've got processes.
They're on board.
At some point, figured out sledding. Somebody figured out maybe there's a surfing thing or something. Like, it depends how far you want to go. But
the fun thing as well is that because it's sort of D&D and that this is very much a real entity. It's cool. So that there is a little bit of back and forth between the goddess, and it may be in ineffable ways and whatnot, but the goddess is definitely a real thing. Granting boons to there's a dude who invites a snowboard is raised to the level of saint and that, and
yeah, that kind of thing. I'd love it. Like the idea of during the summer, you've got your surfing dude, and oh man, he managed to cut a mean wave, and the deity is looking down like, how did I never even conceive of this before? And they also get a sainthood, and they get whatever it's over. They get to come up there and surf forever.
Then you got the added thing of but is surfing like that a spit in the face of the god of the sea? Sort of thing.
Yeah, and you've got rivorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe between the gods at that point, it could be like, this is not the domain of the two-legged beings. They should not be out in this space.
Oh, God. The whole wars have been fought over water skiing. The holy war of the wakeboard.
But yeah, bringing it back to the winter thing, I think something like making an ice sculpture with the symbol of the deity or something, that kind of thing feels like it would be, I don't know, in keeping with a religious celebration, and the adherence to that would be very much into doing that wherever they go. Like perhaps they could go from village to village, leaving behind remnants of like, hey, here's the statue that they've built, and it will only last for the season, and that's the point. Yeah,
I like that. I like the idea as well that because of this god's domain, generally they're like we say that this is sort of it's a god of nature really, just of the seasons part of it. So there's not really going to be any people. They're going to be a fairly kind of sort of benign kind of priesthood in terms of like they could only see this festival as a good thing, really, because this is people reacting and celebrating what has been brought by their god. So they're not objecting to the Frostfire Festival at all. If anything, they're just looking at it as like, okay, well, maybe this is an opportunity to get a few more people into the temple. And that, but by and large, anything like this, that even if it not by name is in worship of our deity, then at least this is partly her doing, if you know what I mean. And people are celebrating. So they're kind of, they're not trying to stop people from celebrating in the other ways. They're just doing their thing as part of it, and sort of taking it as like an opportunity to bring a few more people maybe into the fold of like, hey, you know where all this came from, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like a happy coincidence after a fashion that they just. Yeah, they're not there to proselytize. They're not there to force anybody. But it's like, hey, we seem to have shared interests.
Yeah,
there's overlap here.
It is one of their big. Yeah, it's one of their big celebrating things, but their own thing really. It's like a slightly different focus. Like they don't really do the whole Grandfather Winter thing or anything like that.
They might look on that as like a little bit of a kind of like that's a silly local tradition, but it's fine that they do it. It's not in the face of their gods. Like they're not saying that this Grandfather Winter is actually in control of anything. They're just saying that he's there, and that's fine.
Yeah, they've taken they can realize. God, I said they quite a lot in that sentence, didn't I? They've sort of what's the word? Kind of. Resign themselves, but not. I mean, that sounds like they've sort of given up. But I mean, they've kind of. Well, we'll go with resign themselves. Resign themselves to the fact that like this is the folk icon that most people are going to know. It doesn't fly in the face of what our god is doing, sort of thing. So we're not going to condemn it, basically.
Exactly. It's no harm, no foul kind of attitude.
I might be repeating myself a bit there, but yeah.
But I just to bring it around to some sort of like additional sense, and this is just again superfluous thought, but the purpose for those adherents, the ones that are truly worshipping that god and everything, like they'd be the ones that would know when to plant seeds. They'd be the ones that would know when the seasons are changing, would be able to tell people start preparing for this. That the whole build up of winter, perhaps they could have even been part of the reason why things changed once upon a time. That these guys rolled in to wherever this original story took place and said, hey, if you start preparing now, you're going to have a better winter. And that maybe the locals didn't, they might have taken that on board, but they instead attributed other things later on to them coming together. But really, it's kind of like there's a knock-on effect of the religious influence almost. The people that know more pass on a little bit of knowledge, things get better for other people. They don't necessarily acknowledge why that happened, but the adherents know. Ultimately, they can look on and be like, "Ah, yes, we have guided them well." Like they've acted like shepherds almost after a fashion.
Yeah. I mean that kind of this is where it gets a little bit murky, because that kind of strays into, because of the seeds thing. We do have a god of agriculture. In my mind, the sort of more kind of general vibe of the sort of god of seasons and things was that it's really more kind of the seasons are nature, but they're wild and sort of. So it's less the seasons are going to happen, so we are welcoming them as they do, rather than sort of having this as like this is a way to control nature, because agriculture and controlled nature has its own deity.
Okay,
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
That was just my thought on that, really.
Because that way it feels less like that. That might be why the adherence to that deity wouldn't necessarily go around telling people do this, do that, because it's like, hey, nature's doing what it's doing. You're going to do whatever in reaction. We'll do whatever we're going to do in reaction, but we know that what we're doing is correct. Yeah,
that's more the vibe I'm going with. Like they're almost having a parallel celebration. They're doing their own celebration of like, it's the middle of winter. This is, look at all the bounty, the winter bounty that Ori has brought. Whereas at the same time, there's also this general cultural festival of the Frostfire Festival sort of thing. They just happen to be coinciding with, because it's midwinter essentially, and they're they're not opposed to each other.
Great overlap.
Yeah, but I mean, as with anything, there's going to be a little bit of sort of like, there's a little bit of overlap. There's a little bit of like, there's going to be people saying, so what has your god got to do with all of the, sort of thing. So there is going to be a bit of back and forth anyway. They're not just happening in bubbles, but they are kind of in bubbles. They're not sort of, the religious people aren't trying to affect the Frostfire Festival people, but they are there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine that ultimately it would come down to, like, you've got the villagers, the general populace that are having their good time, and you've got your religious folk that are having their good time. And on the side of it, we've got the people singing in the bleak midwinter, and just looking at both groups and be like, God damn, both of you.
Yeah. I think we've covered a lot of it. I mean, what do you think? I mean, we've sort of touched on a lot of the things. I kind of, we didn't really talk too much about where I'd put it as being like the sort of, straddling the 2 years kind of thing. So the sort of the highest day, the sort of big day of the festival is like the essentially New Year's Eve kind of thing.
I think we've covered some interesting stuff though, and we've certainly given we put a lot more meat on the skeleton that you'd already put in place.
Whether I'll get around to typing it up or not in the next couple of days is another matter.
Everybody's heard it audibly, so those that are interested, you now know this is what takes place during the Frostfire Festival. I'm pretty happy with what we've come up with here, and we've been going nearly an hour as well, so that's I think that we've covered that quite well, I think. Unless you had anything else to add. No, I don't think I've got anything specific that I want to throw in. I say it's been a pleasure as ever, and it's always fun, just sort of like I'm trying to think of how to give insight to like people listening, because it's sort of like I don't sit doing this most of the time. Like, so it's really interesting to see what avenues of thought it inspires. Like, it's interesting to hear what your foundational thoughts are, and then I just go, okay, right, so I can see all these hooks, things to stick things on, different avenues to go down, and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely a pleasure.
Okay, well, I think we'll call that a day then. I mean, this is our final episode of 2020, and final episode, final world building episode of the year as well. Coincidentally,
what a year it's been.
Oh yeah. I feel like we've done a lot more bonus episodes like this year, mainly down to the fact that pandemic and stuff kind of limited us a little bit in terms of what we could get together and record with regular games. But I think we've come up with quite a few kind of fun things this year as well. So,
yeah, totally. And what you have recorded, I've been enjoying the D&D stuff that's most recently been happening, and looking forward to whatever's on the horizon for next year. We'll just have to wait and see when we can all come out of our houses and have social lives again.
Indeed, yeah. I feel like I kind of jinxed it last year by making that big sort of like, here's what we're doing in 2020 video, and like
you cussed us all, AJ.
Yeah, this is what happens when I make
a guy who truly affected the whole world.
I make detailed plans, because what was in that video? It was like new party, new characters. Yeah, that happened. We were finishing off Things from the Flood, which we did do, but then we were going to be doing Return of Bork, Prance and Enave. We were going to be doing the second season of Star Wars. We were going to be doing Alien. I was going to eventually get around to doing that musical episode. Just not much of that happened. But hey, 2021 beckons, and vaccines are on the horizon.
Exactly. We'll see. Best laid plans of mice and men. You can never know what's going around the corner.
So yeah, we'll call that a day there. Thank you so much to everybody who's listened to us in the last year, and before, obviously. We will be back in 2021. I don't know if we're going to be back in exactly 2 weeks with the next one. We may do what we usually do, which is often not completely planned, but we seem to take Januaries off sometimes. We'll see how we get on after Christmas and New Year, and that's sort of out of the way. I don't think, like I say, at the very least, we're not going to be back in 2 weeks. We're going to be back in a little while. Keep an eye on social medias and everything, which you can find us at Pretend with Dice on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I haven't posted on Instagram for a little bit. I will get to that very soon. Yeah, as always, you can find us on Discord. The link to that is in our Twitter bio and the contact page on our Podbean site. We have a Ko-Fi page, ko-fi/pretendingwithdice. And you can email us at pretendingwithdice@outlook.com. I sound really uncertain there because I don't have my script in front of me for the ending of the shows.
Just trying to rack your brain for a second. Oh, God, all those addresses.
Ending the year like we always end things. Badly.
And if you want to get to me, just to top things off, I'm at Monkey Magic Eden on Twitter, and every Saturday, most recently, I have been hosting Jackbox Party Pack games alongside AJ, a variety of other listeners, people that have been on the podcast, a variety of people from other places. So if you're interested, just jump on the Pretending with Dice Discord, and you'll see it when I'm posting links to that. And more than welcome to join us and tell terrible jokes, make references to Craig David, and draw pictures of people in sunglasses.
That Craig David thing really got out of hand, didn't it?
I enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm still enjoying it. I might be the only one, but I totally tickled me.
Yeah. Okay, so well, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you in 2021. See you later.
Bye-bye.